let me turn to the issue of China, where you and the president head next. The lead of a New York Times story out this morning about the president's visit there says this: when President Obama visits China for the first time on Sunday, he will in many ways be assuming the role of profligate spender coming to pay his respects to his banker. With that as the backdrop, with China holding so much U.S. debt, $2 trillion worth, what is your assessment of U.S.-China relations?
Well, I think that our relations are on a positive, cooperative basis with a comprehensive agenda that we are exploring together. Secretary Geithner and I co-chair the Strategic and Economic Dialogue that we started this year because we didn't want to just have an economic dialogue. We wanted to have a much more comprehensive engagement. I think that there is evidence that there's some positive results already. The Chinese have stood with us in the sanctions against North Korea. The Chinese are part of the P5+1 effort to try to engage Iran on its nuclear program. We are seeing signs of a cooperative relationship. Now, let me go, though, to the premise of your question. When I ran for president, I started saying all the time, that in effect we were ceding our fiscal sovereignty and that China was our banker. So it's not news that that's going to be in the papers on the eve of our visit to China. We have to get back to fiscal responsibility. It breaks my heart, David, that in 2001 we had a balanced budget and a surplus, and if we had stayed on that path, we were heading toward eliminating our debt. Well, here we are 8 years later, thanks to wars that weren't paid for, thanks to financial collapses and so many other crises that we inherited. But the president understands clearly that we have to get back some control over time of our fiscal sovereignty.
Can I ask you something different about China, which is in light of the fact that China has a robust espionage policy against the United States, that they are cooperating with Iran in international affairs. Are they hurting our national security interests?
Well, look, we are well aware of not just one country, but many countries that try to gain advantage, not just politically and strategically, but commercially vis-a-vis our own country. And we are also well aware that many countries have relationships with those with whom we do not. But I think it's more significant that China signed on to our P5+1 statement in New York. China has been at the table as we have been pushing Iran to fulfill what they agreed to in principle, to send out their low-enriched uranium so that it can be reprocessed elsewhere. So I think it's a much more complicated and mixed story. But, I travel on behalf of our country, and I meet with leaders from all over the world every day, and I have no illusions going into any meeting that anybody stands for America's interests besides me. The task is to look for where we can find common ground and common interests. It is significant that China signed on to the toughest sanctions ever against North Korea because we worked very hard to make the case that those sanctions were not just something that America or South Korea or Japan wanted, but they were in the interests of China. Similarly, in my conversations with Chinese leaders, I make it very clear that a nuclear-armed Iran will destabilize the region that produces the oil and the gas that China desperately needs and for which they have contracts. So why wouldn't we try to stabilize the region by preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons in the first place? So that's what diplomacy is about. I mean, you start from the premise of what are your security interests? What is it that you wish to present? And how do you make the case that what you're seeking is also in the interests of your counterpart?